TriPoint Conversations, and I'm your host, Christina Lowe. And today I'm sitting down with Jason West, Executive Vice President and co-founder of NextGen Scientific and Genzada Pharmaceuticals, as well as CEO of Hyatt Life Sciences. Jason studied biology, went to law school, and then helped grow his family's chemical company from a small Kansas business into one of the largest companies in its industry before its $300 million sale. But the next chapter began with a plant his father remembered from growing up near Jerusalem, one that families there had used as a traditional remedy for centuries. That memory eventually led to a research program, an investigational cancer drug in human clinical trials, and a separate line of nutritional supplements. Today, we're going to talk about how Jason got here, what it takes to move an unconventional idea through real scientific testing, and how the rest of us can stay curious without believing every big claim we hear. Jason, welcome to TriPoint Conversations.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so I want to get started before the cancer research. You started as a biology major, went to law school, and then joined your family's chemical company as a general counsel. What did you think your career was going to look like at that point?
I think back in those days, I was just happy to have a job. When I got out of law school, it was a really tough market, so it was very challenging to find a position, and didn't actually intend on ending up back at the family business. But that's just how the stars aligned, and was recently married and about to start a family and needed to pay some school loans back, and so dove into the work and actually found that I really, really enjoyed it, and just enjoyed the challenge of it and the fact that every day was a new day and there was no 2 days were alike. And I think back in those days, I probably did think that this would just be what we were going to do for the rest of the of my career, because the idea of selling the business that we had kind of grown and built up, and we'd just been living that business for the better part of my life. I think Dad started the company when I was about 6 years old, so that's all I really knew. The idea of exiting was very foreign, but as time went on and we started looking at the possibility of that opportunity, then we started thinking about life after JCAM and what might we do, as a chapter two, and that's kind of how I ended up here, I guess. But long answer to a very short question. Sorry.
No, and so when you joined the company, it had less than 40 employees, but by the time it was sold, it had more than 700. What did you learn during that growth period that you still kind of rely on today?
It's funny. I've said it this way for a long time. I probably attribute a lot of our success to obviously building good products and trying to solve problems, but that can only take you so far. At the end of the day, you really need to find good people. And for whatever reason, call it clean living, I don't know, but we always had a knack for finding good people, and let them do their work and let them perform, and tried to equip them as best we could, from the company's perspective, and then just stay out of their way. Let them do their thing. And when you find good people and you surround yourself with those good people, magic happens. And so that's how I think we ended up really growing, frankly. It's that simple.
And when we spoke before, you mentioned that chance favors the prepared. What did being prepared look like before the opportunities showed up?
I think that when you just keep your nose to the grindstone, and you do your homework, the science very, very well, then you're prepared for the day. I can actually remember the day that, in my opinion, probably somewhat of a turning point for our chemicals business. A customer, a company that was not our customer, I should say, from way up in North Dakota, long way away from Kansas. We didn't have any experience there really, but Gene, Dad, had gone up there a few times to help consult on a couple of smaller issues, and this customer called and said, "Hey, we'd heard good things about you, and we'd like you to come up and take a look at our field. It's a very
Mhm.
large customer. And so we went up, did the work, conducted what they call a field survey just to get familiar with all of their oil and gas production in that particular area. Ran the analyses actually in the hotel room that evening, or at the end of the week, I should say. We were collecting samples for an entire week, and then gave our findings to them at a big meeting the following day. And they called us, and then we got on the road home, and they called us about 5 or 6 hours into the drive and said, "Hey, we'd like you to take over. Can you start in 2 weeks?"
Wow.
And so that was a little bit of a moment where everybody kind of just held their breath for a minute, because we said, "Well, wait a minute, we don't have any people, we don't have any equipment, we don't have any infrastructure in North Dakota at all."
Mhm.
But we were there in 2 weeks and took over the entire rest of the field in 6 weeks. So you, when I say chance favors the prepared, I guess it just means you're ready when that call comes.
Mhm.
You you just do what you normally are doing, solve the problems, and then the work will find you. And so
Mhm.
much like the customer in North Dakota, we got a call out of the blue, and we had been getting phone calls right and left. Somehow we got on the radar screen of a bunch of different uh, potential buyers. The only one we really took seriously was a gentleman that called from up in Canada and said, "This is what we'd like to do." And so it ended up actually being a very, very smart move on our part. When we sold in 2013, it was actually probably kind of a high point within the oil and gas industry.
Mhm.
2 years later, it started to degrade quite rapidly in terms of the oil price and activity and so forth. So again, you take the opportunities that come your way, and it made us look very smart to sell at the high point, of
Mhm.
course. Um, but in retrospect, it opened up so many doors for us to be able to do this work in pharmaceuticals and drug research. And I believe in providence. Not to over dramatize things, but I think the good Lord's looking out for us all the time.
Mhm.
And he's looking out for our best interests, and obviously, we're just trying to help humanity with what we're doing here. So we could have retired, I suppose, but none of us are the retiring type. So
I was gonna
we're gonna
ask
get.
you about that. Yeah, after a sale like that, you could have taken a much easier next chapter, but instead, you went on to something else.
Yeah, I think yeah, it could have been a lot easier. Could have been sipping a drink on the beach or something like that, but that's only fun for maybe a few days.
Yeah.
At the end of it, it's pretty boring, and so you got to get back to work and start contributing.
Mhm.
And I think that's ultimately what we're trying to do at the end of the day. Is Gene tells this story, so I'll tell it. Hopefully somebody gets good from it. He came to the United States as a refugee. Came for the opportunity, came for the education, and all along the way, he's got stories for days, of course, about
Mhm.
um, you know coming here to the United States, and people were very welcoming and took him in, gave him a place to stay. Sometimes during the summer when they shut down the dorms, and gave him jobs and things. And so this is one way that he has said, "Hey, I'm going to try to give back
Mhm.
and kind of essentially pay it forward, for lack of a better term." But that's what happens when you have opportunity, and you I think you have a responsibility and a duty, frankly,
Mhm.
to pay it forward in some way or another, because you're not really contributing much when you're just sipping drinks on the beach.
Yeah.
Let's figure out a way to contribute back to our world.
Yeah, so your dad, I mean, he grew up and he came from a Palestinian refugee camp near
Hmm.
Jerusalem and originally
Yeah.
hoped to become a doctor. How do you think that part of the story eventually led to your family back to this plant?
Yeah, I mean, direct nexus, with with this plant and kind of where we're at now. Because when he came here to the U.S., the intention, was to go to med school. As it turns out, he didn't speak very good English, and so the biology classes were extremely difficult. He
Mhm.
really didn't do very well in those at all. Can't go to med school if you don't have the biology background. But the math and the chemistry classes, that's all, numbers. And so
Mhm.
he was able to do that very well. And so he ended up going more towards chemistry and math. But he never lost that kind of desire to, kind of explore the world of medicine. And
Hmm.
if not as a doctor, then let's do it as a drug company. And that's, I think, that where it all came from. So he maintained that curiosity and just said, hey, here's an opportunity and inroads into that world.
Yeah. So can you take us back into in the lab in the early days and talk about what he began testing and when it moved from an interesting family story to something that much bigger?
Yeah, it was. This is all based on, I think, a confluence of events. Number one, he's got the curiosity, and number two, we had a laboratory which is primarily for oil and gas purposes, but these instruments are actually good for any number of different pursuits. Um, he went back to Jerusalem in about 2005, I believe it was. And this was at the time my grandfather was kind of in ailing health, and so he was just looking in on him and went for a visit. Kind of got reintroduced to this plant, that he grew up with over in that part of the world. It's common in that part of the world. It's used as a kind of an old home remedy
Hmm.
over there and has been for centuries. Uh, but he's been here since he was 17 and really hasn't gone back much other than just for brief visits. So it was a little rusty, and so he got refamiliarized with this plant, and then thought about it and said, well, wait a minute now. If this thing has been in continuous use um, since the earliest references we can find in the literature is back to the ninth century AD.
Hmm.
So continuous use for 1100 years, that doesn't make any sense just from a cultural standpoint or an efficacy standpoint. If there was no efficacy, you would think that it would go away. It'd just be lost to history.
Hmm.
So um, he brought some of it back and started looking into it in the laboratory just to try to identify what's going on here. Um, the other part of this story is, we're in small town America. I mean, you when I say small town, I mean we have one stoplight. We had an all night gas station. Don't have that anymore. There's nothing to do in a small town, and so he was bored,
Hmm.
and he just took it to the laboratory after the day job, in oil and gas. Got curious and said, okay, let's find out what's in the plant. So some of the instruments that we have will identify the actual molecules, the compounds that are in there. And again, just what the good Lord gave us in this plant, several of the molecules do in fact fight cancer.
Hmm.
So that's where, just kind of continuing to follow the science and figure out, what's in it, and then take it further and further. We initially, I think there was 117 different molecules in this plant. We cherry picked three of them because they were kind of prominent in terms of percentages,
Hmm.
and said maybe this is where the efficacy is at. So he first extracted those and then found the right combination of those three in relation to one another, the right ratio. After some testing, just petri dish testing, um, and then at some point we needed to convert it into a fully synthetic version of those three molecules. And so, as a synthesis chemist, that's his forte. So he created the molecules in the lab, and then he started testing the synthetic version. And that's really kind of the beginnings of that drug research right there.
And it started out as a tea, correct? Or
So
drink?
yes, in that part of the world, they'll chop up the plant,
Hmm.
the roots predominantly, but leaves and stems, the whole thing.
Hmm.
Well, first they'll dry it out, and then they'll chop it up, and then they'll brew it on the stove as a tea, using other materials that are around, lemon
Hmm.
juice, garlic, olive oil, all the usual suspects, of course, that you find in a lot of Middle Eastern cooking. Um, and then, yeah, you'll just drink the tea. And
Hmm.
they use it for a lot of different things. But there's actually a study out there. I can't quote it chapter and verse now, but it from a few years ago, and it said I think 22% of Palestinians with a cancer diagnosis still today actually use this tea as part of their treatment regimen.
Hmm.
And so in that part of the world, the extraction method being the boiling. And so that's where we started our research actually was with let's just start with the tea.
Hmm.
We'll make the tea, then we'll freeze dry that liquid, and then you can do the analyses on the freeze dried materials. So that's how that's done in that part of the world. Well, again, because we're in a small town, um, population 2,000. There's no secrets in a small town. Everybody
Hmm.
knows your business. They know what you're up to, and so pretty soon there's a knock at the door, and it was a gentleman that we know, and said, "Hey, I'd love to get a hold of some of this." He had a relative that was dealing with some cancer. He said, "I heard you were making some cancer tea."
Hmm.
We said, "No, that's not exactly right," but um, so we gave him a gallon. Said, "Hey, we know that this is safe to take because people have been using it for centuries. Here you go." And he came back. 1 gallon lasts approximately 1 month,
Hmm.
and so he came back the next month, and then the month after that, and then I think the fourth month he came back and said, "Hey, I think it was his nephew." And he said, "My nephew is fine. He got the all clear from his oncologist. No evidence of disease. He's in remission."
Hmm. Wow.
Um, so that's actually ultimately that knock at the door was actually what started Hyatt Life Sciences, which is our dietary supplement company.
Hmm.
So these two businesses that we have under this umbrella, one we set out specifically to design and create a drug that hopefully the oncologist can use one day. We didn't really have dietary supplements in mind at all, of course,
Hmm.
um, but that's the word spread, and pretty soon I think we were sending about 40 gallons of tea out a week.
Wow.
This is just, friend of a friend kind of a
Yeah.
thing. People find out about it, they talk, and they would call us and say, "I'd love to give it a shot. Would you mind sharing some with me?" I said, "Of course. If we had the materials, we made it."
Hmm.
The only time we ever said no to anybody was if we just didn't have the materials to make. And call after call after call would come back a few months later saying, "We're fine. The tumors are shrinking," or "It's in remission."
Hmm.
And at some point, that just the idea, I guess, of people having those experiences, first of all, is very gratifying,
Hmm.
to be part of that. But I think the saying is, anecdotes don't make evidence,
Hmm.
and not from a scientific standpoint. So, all of it, he's a chemist, I'm a biologist, my brother's actually a physician. We're all very skeptical about what it could possibly have been.
Hmm.
So we didn't really think that this was actually our doing or that we were involved in any way. I mean, all these folks I think most of them were also doing chemo.
Yeah.
Um, but there were plenty of folks, as we later found out, that were just doing the tea,
Got it.
which then kind of started us thinking down a slightly different path. Because one, if a saying is, there's only two certainties in life, death and taxes, right?
Hmm.
One of our he's an advisor for us on the cancer research side. He said the other certainty in life is that cancer grows.
Hmm.
Cancer doesn't just go away, right? It is designed to grow and proliferate. And so if a person is not receiving anything as far as pharmaceuticals, you almost always expect that cancer to grow. So
Hmm.
for this to have occurred was anomalous. And we said, okay, there's got to be something going on here with this tea. Um, Over time, we converted it into a powder instead of a liquid, and then encapsulated the powder. So now the product is actually an encapsulated material. Um, but and that kind of solves two problems. One is shipping, and the other one is it tastes terrible. That tea is awful.
Yeah.
So it'll curl your hair, and so it must be good for you as bad as it tastes, I guess. But So we finally figured out that there is actually a desire here on the part of cancer patients to do something extra.
Mm-hmm.
Almost everybody, and we always encourage people, please don't stop your chemo.
Mm-hmm.
Chemo's around for a reason. It's got a bad rap in some circles, but it's there for a reason and it works. Um, so what we found though is that people want to do chemo and something
Yeah.
else,
Mm-hmm.
and we can be that,
And
and
you've
that's
also
kind of where we ended
described
up.
you've described your team as its own biggest skeptic. What question do you think you kept asking yourself that protected you from simply seeing what you wanted to see?
Uh, it was probably a two-part question. I think the first question was, really,
Mm-hmm.
really, and the second question was, which I think is very important, why?
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you kind of keep your eye on those two balls, right, just focus on those two questions alone, I think you can really go pretty far,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how you can probably, you know, overcome a lot of your own skepticism and others, because if you are skeptical and you put it through its paces as a product,
Mm-hmm.
then hopefully you have proved up the science, to a degree necessary to take it to the next step and the next step and the next step, and keep asking that question of why.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and why does it work? Why might it work? And you know, just go from there.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like a silly recipe, but honestly, that it is somewhat
Yeah.
simple in that way.
Yeah. And for someone listening who sees a bold claim about a supplement or alternative therapy, what should they check before they spend money or change anything about their care?
That's a darn good question. I think so. From our vantage point as the company, you'll never see marketing material that says, "Hey, take this product; it'll help you with your cancer."
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a supplement, we can't market it as such. But I can tell you, just by virtue of knowing our customer base, that probably 80% of the customers that are buying this product, which we call it Afaya Plus.
Mm-hmm.
Afaya is the Arabic word for health or life. Um, and so probably 80% or better of those customers are dealing with some form of a cancer diagnosis. And they tell us this. And so we
Mm-hmm.
know that there's truth there. But we don't market it as such, of course. And I think people, nowadays, in today's day and age with social media and so forth, I mean, people talk and they
Mm-hmm.
share their experiences with it. And so in our case, we have a Facebook page called the Afia Plus Users Group, where people can get on there and just learn about other people's experiences. And I think there's similar, examples, of a lot of different products out there. Get a flavor for what people are saying about it. That they'll tell you the truth. And
Mm-hmm.
I can't say that it has worked for everyone, of course, not a magic bullet by any stretch,
Yeah.
but there's some folks on there that said, "Hey, I took it, didn't do a darn thing for me." And there's others that say, "I took it for 2 weeks and it helped." Those
Yeah.
kinds of things. So read up on it for sure in that respect, but don't stop there. I would
Mm-hmm.
say the next step for sure is do as much as you can in terms of quality
Mm-hmm.
checking. Quality confirmation I think is important because you know, it's just a fact that there's a lot of supplement companies out there that are probably not very responsible.
Mm-hmm.
And we obviously are trying to distance ourselves from that greatly by focusing heavily on the science, focusing heavily on the quality of the ingredients. And we check everything that comes in the door. It's labeled as garlic. We just, but we check it. We put it on the lab instruments to make sure that it matches. The molecules that are in that are the same as what
Mm-hmm.
are on our confirmation standards. So we don't take anybody's word for it if they say it's garlic,
Yeah.
for instance. So and call. In our case, just call us.
Yeah.
Our phone number is prominently displayed on our website.
Mm-hmm.
You can send us an email. I mean, we have people that really do check and they
Yeah.
read the ingredients list. I think those are important.
Mm-hmm. And now you have multiple paths that you're going down. One is developing the investigational drug part of it, and then one
Mhm.
is the nutritional supplements. Why was it important to build both paths?
So we really didn't set out to be in the dietary supplement business. This was more, I would call it a happy accident.
Okay.
And it was really just recognizing that there's a need and saying, hey, this wasn't part of our plan, but we can pivot, to a degree and participate in that for and help people. We're in the chemistry business at the end of the day. I
Hmm.
think, whether it's drugs or supplements, it's all molecules. And some of those molecules are helpful for people, whether it's in the form of a supplement or a drug. I'm not dogmatic about that. And so from our vantage point, I think we just say if we can help, we're going to help on both sides of the equation. Um, our original goal, of course, was to set out and you know be impactful in the oncology world.
Hmm.
And so with that kind of first lead drug, we call it 6.02, which is our internal code for it. It's actually in a clinical trial right now for advanced prostate cancer
Hmm.
with Virginia Commonwealth University is actually who's conducting the study. Um, and then we also have another drug called 21T, which is a topical drug that's focused on. It's actually a skin condition called actinic keratosis, which it's those red spots that you sometimes see on, especially the golfers. They spend too much time out in the sun, or the guys that are fishing all the time.
Hmm.
They get those red spots developing over time. Given enough time, actinic keratosis can turn into skin cancer, squamous cell carcinoma.
Hmm.
And so pretty serious, and if you can nip it in the bud beforehand, that's great. Um, the downside of actinic keratosis treatment, though, is the one most common treatment is burning it off, and that's pretty painful and kind of not great from a patient's perspective. It's quick
Hmm.
and affordable, of course. The other is a cream, which is very, very hard on people. And if you see pictures of folks that have received that treatment, it's pretty rough on
Hmm.
patients, and it's very painful, and it's kind of a longer term treatment. And so a lot of times patients will give up before they
Hmm.
get to the end of their treatment regimen, which is not good because obviously it gives that cancer a chance to grow.
Yeah.
And so in our case, if we can be a topical cream that is a little easier on people
Hmm.
and just as safe, but shows either equal or greater efficacy, then you've got yourself a really good alternative.
Yeah.
So.
So, also bring us up to date on the 6.02. What has been learned so far, and what is the team trying to establish in the current stage of the clinical development?
So one of the things we've learned so far is that this has been a very challenging drug to kind of to figure out what they call the mechanism of action.
Hmm.
Um, it's very interesting. You have to characterize that drug and identify the mechanism of action. How is it working at a cellular level? It's metabolized very rapidly. So that metabolism is important because it shows that it got into the tissue that we want it to get into. But it's also challenging because it's very tough to figure out what channel did it go through to actually achieve the result and what is happening, at that cellular level. It's interesting. We've actually come up with our working theory is actually that it's a super enhancer modulator, which
Can you explain that to
really,
us?
yeah, this was a doozy of an inquiry because and we still don't have it fully characterized and figured out to the degree that we want to. But what it seems to be doing is affecting what they call some super enhancer genes. These are genes which control a lot of other downstream genes. They are for lack of a better word, if you think about a river, they might be the headwaters of that river.
Hmm.
And so as that river, meanders down the path that it takes various different tributaries, and branches off, from the main trunk of that river. Um, if we are affecting the headwaters of that genetic process, then by definition, can affect the downstream genetic processes that are going on.
Hmm.
Now, this is where it gets maybe even a little bit more complicated too, because certain genes in our body, uh, which are called proto-oncogenes, those are genes that just kind of naturally tend to cause cancer or promote cancerous activity. And your body, in a normal situation, will combat that. The immune system takes over, and so forth. Um, we appear to be actually naturally suppressing those proto-oncogenes. Um, there are also genes which are considered tumor suppressor genes, and these are genes that naturally tend to fight cancer.
Hmm.
And so they kind of almost work in a little bit of a balance. The tumor suppressor genes are fighting the proto-oncogenes all the time, and hopefully winning most of the time. Um, we tend to actually be enhancing or boosting those tumor suppressor genes. So you've got this action where if we are right about what we think is happening here at this as a super enhancer modulator, is we are turning up the tumor suppressor gene
Hmm.
and turning down the proto-oncogene. So you have this effect where you're kind of doing this at the same time, where you're helping on both ends of it. It's almost like a 1-2 punch.
Yeah.
And that, if we are right, it starts to explain why we are seeing so much effect against a multitude of different cancers, not just the prostate cancer that we're in trials with right now.
Hmm.
It seems to be helping across a whole host of different cancers, several of which are biologically different. You would not expect to see one drug working on, let's say, both colorectal and breast,
Hmm.
as an example. Um, but for whatever reason, our drug seems to be. And the only theory that kind of makes sense to my brain is, if we're a super enhancer modulator, we're affecting the headwaters,
Hmm.
everything else below it, which might include breast and might also include colorectal.
Hmm.
Now you're starting to make a little bit of sense.
So, what are the next milestones that would make a meaningful change with the future of Genzada?
I think first and foremost, I really want to we're about to start the topical trial.
Hmm.
That'll start later this year, as a matter of fact, probably mid Q4 is our guess. And that's actually in Sweden and the Netherlands for the
Hmm.
topical. Um, that actually, I think, could go very quickly. And so, as a milestone, my hope is that we can very, very rapidly prove the efficacy of the product. And if so, then that might actually get on the radar screen. What we think is most likely to happen is a big pharma company, larger pharma company than ours, would come in and say, "Hey, we're interested in this. Let's buy or license this from you."
Hmm.
Um, that's a big inflection point, from a value standpoint, but also they'll take it that last mile of development,
Hmm.
get it across the finish line, and then then it becomes in the hands of the dermatologists and the cancer community to actually use it as a drug.
Mass market.
Um,
Yeah.
exactly,
Hmm.
because I think there's something like 60 million cases of actinic keratosis just in the United States alone every
Hmm.
year. Big market, lots of problems, that we can solve.
Hmm.
Um, so, and that also obviously provides us with, some resources now that we can further develop and further explore some of those other cancers that we can help, the more organ tumor cancers, if you will,
Hmm.
that 6.02 is really for. That's the oral capsule. Um, but every single time that you run a trial, you can count on spending a significant amount of money. And so that's our hope, is that
Hmm.
that we can. I believe personally that we could see a sale or a licensure of the topical first, because it
Hmm.
happens more quickly, and then we can turn our attention back to 6.02 in a much more meaningful way. and launch multiple trials all at the
Yeah.
same time.
Yeah, because you mentioned, mass market and being in rural Kansas. What has that how has that affected what you're doing?
Oh, I think it kind of is a double-edged sword, I guess
Mhm.
I would say. In part, it's probably been a disadvantage in the sense that there's a bit of a lift just to get people to take you seriously because you're not from Boston or San Francisco,
Mhm.
some of the more common places where drugs are typically developed.
Yeah.
Um, on the other hand, though, too, it's very easy to avoid distraction here.
Mhm.
And so you can keep your focus right where it needs to be. And, maybe there's some disadvantages to it, but I'll take Kansas all day long, frankly.
Yeah.
Just
Go ahead.
just a kind of an aside, being in the nutritional supplement business, being from, kind of call it middle America here, has been a little bit more challenging from a supplement perspective, just because we don't have a lot of the population density.
Mhm.
And that's a very, very real world practical challenge, from a business standpoint to get out to the mass market. Our biggest challenge right now on the supplement side of our business is really just getting people to know that we exist.
Mhm.
And it takes a long time and a lot of money you know, to market yourself and just creating brand awareness
Mhm.
is a pretty heavy cost just in and of itself. So it's been challenging in that way, but because you know, we're low on resources, we're still small. We have
Yeah.
to think outside the box. And so, we've had a lot of customers that have had really good results, and they've been kind enough actually to spread the word, and they hold what we call town hall meetings. And so we'll just go around to some of these town hall meetings and talk to people. And it's a very low cost way to spread the word about what we're doing. And it also is, I think, a little bit more meaningful because there's a personal touch there,
Mhm.
as opposed to just serving up an ad on Facebook or what have
Oh
you.
yeah.
That's all well and good. There's a place for that for sure, but this is a much more personal kind of approach. And at some point, I think it probably tips, the balance tips in favor of Facebook and Instagram, I'm sure. But in the meantime, we can do a lot of good and spread the word here locally, and we'll let the people talk. That's probably the best advertisement anyway.
Because I'm sure it is hard to, in the supplement world, prove credibility if you don't come with a big brand or big box name to stand behind it.
It is. It's
Mhm.
very tough. There's probably a gajillion supplement companies, only five of which anybody's actually ever heard of.
Mhm.
And those big companies, for sure, they've worked very hard and done a great job of brand recognition,
Mhm.
segregating themselves from a quality standpoint, all the things that they should be doing. We think we can be a little bit different yet still because we're approaching it from maybe a I'm not saying more scientific, but a very rigorously scientific standpoint.
Mhm.
And also, we're unique in the sense that we have almost all of our of our product line is patented, actually,
Mhm.
which is pretty darn unique in the supplement industry.
Yeah.
A lot of the ingredients in the supplement industry are actually, well-known food products that have been around for centuries.
Mhm.
Ours is a unique combination, and the Arum palestinum plant, which is a mainstay of all of our products, is one of the key ingredients, and that's unique to our United States food supply. And so all of our products, with the exception, I think, of one, actually, are all patented.
Mhm. And so I also read that you've raised $45 million for Genzada. What makes an investor willing to fund something that could take years, and kind of the unknown? What makes
Yeah.
them fund that?
So we've actually raised a little over 75 million.
Oh, congratulations.
So yeah, and that's a big number,
Yeah.
honestly. I mean, I think that's a pretty rare thing. I think that a lot of it has to do with we just basically, when we talk to investors, we just lay out, here's what we think we know. Here's where we've been. Here's where we're at right now. and here's where we think we're going.
Hmm.
Um, and we tell them about the pitfalls. We tell them about the things that are challenges, the
Hmm.
things that could, in theory, derail the whole darn thing, you know.
Yeah.
And I think we're just telling them, just tell the truth, you know. That's the main thing, you know. Genuinely and authentically tell them, you know, here's where we think we're headed, and here's why we believe.
Hmm.
Um, you know, because this is certainly a long road for
Yeah.
sure. It takes a really long time to develop drugs. But in the meantime, I think the supplement business actually, you know, showing growth, showing efficacy, showing that we can help people, that there's a product, you know, line that is kind of fully built out now, that's meaningful to people.
Hmm.
And, you know, especially that we have a unique mechanism of action. Super enhancer modulation is not a mechanism of action that other drugs that I'm aware of, at least, are using. They're not super enhancer modulators.
Hmm.
So if we can be a unique drug class, that also is a differentiator as well. Um, so tough. It's a
Yeah.
tough thing.
Well, when you talk about that long middle road, because some people see the beginning of the idea and the discovery, and then years later they might see an approved drug. What does happen in that long, expensive middle that people never see?
Oh boy. Well,
In the short
frankly,
version.
a lot of waiting. That's
Yeah.
really what it is. There's a line for darn near everything, it seems,
Hmm.
and so you find yourself actually waiting, you know, to conduct this test or this analysis or what have you, because, um, you know, if you want to go run some preclinical analysis and do a mouse study on this or that, you know, there might be a 4 month lead time, you know, just
Hmm.
to get in, just to start the thing. And then it takes a long time to lock the data and you know, get all the information, you know, statistically analyzed and so forth. So um, but the other thing that is happening too is, especially with human clinical trials, is um, it is hard to, and sometimes hard to enroll patients.
Hmm.
And the reason is because, and this is really where, again, not to over dramatize things, but these folks that participate, these patients that participate in these clinical trials, in my opinion, are probably the true heroes of the story, because especially the early drug research, these phase one drugs. Another term for phase one is first in human trial, meaning no human has ever actually taken this drug.
Yeah.
Now, we do a lot of homework. We do a
Hmm.
lot of testing. We do all the toxicology. We do all of the mouse and rat studies and so forth, and try to come up with an assumption, a really, really close assumption of what we think is going to happen in a human body.
Hmm.
But at the end of the day, nobody really knows.
Yeah.
So when those people, very first people that pop that pill into their mouth, they are taking a not insignificant risk,
Yeah.
you know. And so for them to be willing to do that is a really significant amount of courage.
Hmm.
And they're also, these people are facing, they're in tough circumstances. These are
Hmm.
advanced cancer patients in our case. Um, and so they are very much, I think, kind of in a Hail Mary situation. And you know, so for them to say yes to that, instead of saying, you know what, I may not have much time left, I'm going to go spend it with my family.
Hmm.
That's what a reasonable response would be,
Yeah.
honestly. It's really, really impressive and always shocking to me that people say yes to a clinical trial. Um, so, not to belabor the point, but it's just, it takes a long time to find people who are actually willing to do that, because I think
Hmm.
most folks do say, "Hey, I'm just going to go spend time with my family," and there's nothing wrong with that response at all.
Yeah.
Um, so it does take a long time to enroll, and
Hmm.
that's why some of these clinical trials are open for years, because it's sometimes the disease or the specific segment of the disease is
Hmm.
somewhat narrow. So
Hmm.
finding enough people and a critical mass of people to say yes to those trials
Yeah.
is tough.
It does take courage for them. And I'd say from you, it has taken a lot of curiosity. What do you think has
Always.
continued to push that curiosity?
You know, just because I think we continue to just see little bits and pieces of evidence. It's almost like you're following a breadcrumb trail, and
Hmm.
just saying, okay, well, I kind of think I know where we're going now a little bit,
Hmm.
or I think I know what's around the next bend. And so it probably would be easier, I guess, to just say, I'm tired. But
Yeah.
it, you don't even really think about getting tired because there's that next breadcrumb and you can
Hmm.
see it coming before you get around the corner. You can see it coming. You just say, well, I got to keep going one more step,
Yeah.
and one more step. And then after that, one more step. So it does get a little tough sometimes, but
Hmm.
every day, I almost think sometimes because of the fact that the supplement we think is somewhat of an archetype of what the drug ultimately will be doing,
Hmm.
on a clinical basis. When we see so many people that have had benefit from the
Hmm.
supplements, it kind of invigorates us all, and it keeps us motivated.
Yeah.
And so we say, you know what, we might be tired today, but we'll go take a nap.
Yeah.
We'll get up the next day and we'll get back after it again.
Yeah.
Because you have to.
Yes. Yeah.
Because
Especially if
somebody
you're
might,
seeing success. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And the other thing too is that somebody might, if you have an off day, somebody might suffer for that.
Hmm.
So you better get your butt to work.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I want to move into a lightning round with short answers, no overthinking.
Yeah, you bet.
You call yourself a recovering attorney. What is the one law school habit, though, you're glad you kept?
Oh boy. Um, I think probably reading everything.
Hmm.
In short, I was a voracious reader before law school. I'm probably much more of a voracious reader now.
Hmm.
So reading everything.
Which gave you the bigger adrenaline rush, the sale of the company or seeing the first patient success?
Gosh, that's a hard one. Uh, I, I'm a utilitarian, so I'm going to say sale of the company.
Hmm.
And the reason I say that is only because you might be able to help one person in that one trial,
Hmm.
but with the resources of the sale of the company, just again from a very practical standpoint, I think we can help a lot more.
Yeah. You mentioned your dad's version of downtime was going to the lab to tinker. What is your version of downtime?
I am not the lab tinkerer guy, that's for sure.
Hmm.
I would say probably going on a hike. I'll sit down on the couch and plow through a book. And I love to spend time with my girls. I have four daughters.
Hmm.
So we like to go kayaking together a lot, and sometimes riding four wheelers. So much more the recreational pursuits for sure.
Yeah. What is your favorite vacation destination?
Ooh, uh, w- we've found our way onto some trails one time in Colorado and just had an absolute ball riding four wheelers in the backcountry.
Hmm.
And I think I could probably do that every day for the rest of my life and not get tired of it.
Yeah. What are you deeply curious about right now that has nothing to do with cancer research?
Uh, I I find myself really loving to read a lot about investing and why are some businesses successful and why are some not.
Hmm.
Um, and so in particular, I'm probably interested right now in trying to understand what's happening in our market right now, just
Hmm.
the overall stock market. So very much a kind of a nerdy thing to say, but that's where I'm at today.
Yeah.
Next month it could be different, actually.
And before we close, though, if you could go back to when you were just starting this journey, what advice would you give yourself?
Uh, I would say don't give up.
Hmm.
Um, there's a gal at the time that we met her. She was, I think, 9. I think she was 9. Um, and she had a really, really tough diagnosis, um, rhabdomyosarcoma. And if we would have given up, then she would not probably be around.
Hmm.
Um, so don't give up.
Yeah. Thank you. And for people that want to follow the research and learn more about your work, where is the best place to find that?
Oh boy, website probably. I would
Yeah.
say Genzada.com is one good place, but we don't spend a lot of time actually updating that website.
Hmm.
Um, HyattLifeSciences.com is another one, and so they can learn about the products that we have, the supplement products that we have available. Um, we also have, we're actually in the middle of doing our fundraising right
Hmm.
now as well. So we're raising more capital so that we can pursue the drug, development further. Um, and that one is actually
Hmm.
investinnextgen.com. Um, and that one has all the information about the actual investment itself, and also a lot about kind of the status of the company
Yeah.
as well. So, and the other thing too is just call us.
Hmm.
We talk to people all the time, so we're happy to talk to anyone and everyone, just to give them kind of the latest and greatest.
And we will share all of that in our show notes as well.
Okay, great.
Yeah. All right. Well,
Thank you.
thank you so much for sharing your story and what you are working on. I think we're all excited to follow along and see where this goes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you for listening to TriPoint Conversations. Thanks for listening to TriPoint Conversations. Make sure you hit subscribe wherever you're listening so you never miss an episode. If this conversation resonated with you, share it with a friend or someone who's navigating their own next chapter. And if you know a story that deserves to be heard, or maybe that story is yours, head to tripointstrategicgroup.com and send me a note. I can't wait to keep this journey going with you and introduce you to more incredible people who are shaping their communities one story at a time.